Excerpt from the 469th Contact Report of August 11, 2008 TAT. King Arthur, or Artus, King of the Celts, contrary to today's depiction of having been a hero or the like, was absolutely neither a courtly king in shining armor nor a good-hearted and noble hero. King Artus was a fierce 6th century clan leader, a war king, who led his pagan warriors in bloody battles and raids. He was a slaughterer and kept the name the Boar of Cornwall. His knights truly were bloodthirsty murderous thugs, as you say. Artus himself was Merlin's protégé, a pupil of Merlin the Druid, for 7 years. Born on January 4, 469, Arthur died on August 11, 509 in the Battle of Camlan, Crooked Valley, in a battle with his nephew Prince Medrawd. Arthur was a brutal and stubborn man to whom human life meant little or nothing. Arthur's wife was Gwainhwythera, Gwanhamara, or Guinevere, White Spirit or Glowing Spirit, Billy's Note. His father was Uther Tuda, carrying the surname Pendragon, who was already married and impregnated another woman in a most insidious manner and thus procreated Arthur. Arthur's mother was Igerna, who was also married and was the wife of Prince Gorloy. Actually, the liberal Celtic marriage laws did not overvalue lifelong physical fidelity. Thus, while Gorloy, the Cornic Duke, was deceived and cheated by the fraud, King Uther and Queen Igerna could engage in a sexual act. The story goes like this: Arthur's father, Uther Tuda Pendragon, fell in love with Queen Igerna of Cornwall, the young and beautiful wife of Gorloy, Duke and Prince of Cornwall. Igerna, however, was faithful to her husband. So Uther Pendragon sought the support of Merlin and devised an intrigue to abduct the Queen of Cornwall and seduce her. Merlin lured Gorloy away from his castle on a pretext in order for Uther Pendragon to secretly snatch Igerna at night and bring her to Tintagel. A confidant of Merlin, who was also a servant to the Queen Igerna of Cornwall, then administered a drug to her, and she reached a hallucinogenic and will-less state. Igerna was kidnapped from the castle and taken to a certain place where Uther Tuda Pendragon and several male and female druids were already assembled under Merlin's leadership. Inside the circle they formed, Uther and the drugged, will-less, Igerna performed the procreation. From their union, Arthur/Artus/Arthus was born on January 4, 469. Uther Tuda did not leave that matter to rest for long. The very same night he let Igerna's prince consort Gorloy be killed by his own bloodthirsty knights. The plan he devised with Merlin thus ended with complete success, Igerna's husband now out of the way. When Gorloy's dead body was returned to Tintagel, Igerna was already back home, but was now made pregnant by Uther Tuda and was still highly intoxicated by the drug and did not realize what had really happened, since she only later learned everything. The Khalid Volch sword, pronounced Khalidfluk, was known as a lightning sword because it emitted lightning-like rays. It later became known as Clyburn and was rendered falsely by the Church and its Latin language as Excalibur. It was a light ray weapon in the form of a sword, forged on the Isle of Avalon under the guidance and with the participation of the Plejaren one Kiridwina, a sister of my grandfather Ezekiel II. One Plejaren is the female form of a Plejaren person, Plejare is the male form. To note, Ezekiel was Sfatha's father, so Kiridwina is Tata's great-aunt. Kiridwina gave it as a gift to Merlin, who later handed it to Arthur, who then fought many bloody battles with it. All of Kiridwina's efforts to regain possession of the sword failed because it had been abused. Hence, she was very angry with Merlin but could not persuade him to demand Arthur's sword back and return it to her. It was only after Arthur's death that the sword was reclaimed by Merlin and returned to the Plejaren Kiridwina, after which she left Earth. She had already angrily ceased contact with Merlin at the time when Arthur committed his first murderous deeds with the sword. Dynasbran is the castle where Merlin lived. Dynasbran Valley was located in the Cymru region where Merlin, the one with great knowledge, was also working. Merlin's real name was Myrddin, the Laughing One. Merlin, the Druid of Camelot, received his initiation when he was just 9 years old, but he was not a magician and sorcerer, as falsely declared by Christianity, but a well-versed druid in many different fields of knowledge. He was also a bard, a doctor, a teacher, a prophet, a historian, and ultimately the king and prince of Druids of the Deemtir tribe from South Wales. He taught in the West/Occident on Plejaren Kiradwinas, the triple goddess, Billy's note, instructions, and had great visionary skills based on his practiced meditations. Merlin's father was King Morvran, and his mother was a daughter of the king of the Deemtir. Merlin's father was also a visionary, and these visionary capabilities led to the evil legend within the Christian world that Merlin was a scion of the devil, a magician, a sorcerer. The naivete and simplicity of the Christian interpretation held that Merlin and his father's paranormal abilities meant that they were satanical, and that father and son were allied with the devil and fathered by him. Merlin was born on May 1, 449. He also picked up the sword and fought with it, and he used his skills in military operations and as Arthur's military advisor, contrary to the instruction and wishes of the Plejaren Kiradwina, however without becoming morally bankrupt. Merlin also fought with his sword against the warlike Christian intruders who stole into the country through murder and arson, killing off or suppressing the population, to spread the Christian faith, conquer the land and destroy Celtic philosophy and beliefs. After his last fight, when he was 66 years old in year 515, at the lost battle at Arfderid, Merlin fled and settled down in a remote area in the wilderness of Caledonia in the Cheviot Hills, where he lived as Merdin Wyllt, Merlin in the wilderness. He lived there for some time and then returned to his hometown, where an old female druid named Nynyana, also known as Nemu, joined him and was a good friend to him. When he felt his death approaching, she finally accompanied Merlin on Ynys Inley, Bardsey Island, which he had chosen as his death place. He died there in the arms of the old druid, on June 14, 542 at the age of 93, and he was buried by the wise woman in a rocky cave according to his wishes. The Knights of the Round Table were malignant, bloody knights and not heroes, as they are presented today. Merlin, being a seer, made prophetic and foresight statements of which his dragon prophecy made at Dinas Emrys, fortress of Emrys or Ambrosius respectively, is very well known, besides those which he made in the wilderness of Caledonia. By year 466, Merlin had already been contacted by the Plejaren Kiradwina, who, as I mentioned earlier, was a sister of my grandfather Ezekiel, the mediator. This took place after the High Council decided to convey Henoch's teachings to Merlin, which he was to disseminate in order to contain the barbarism of the Celts so that they would refrain from barbarity and their bloody battles. Merlin, being a Celtic druid, was chosen because the High Council hoped that with his help, King Arthur, who, according to a Vorosja, German equals view into the future, was to be born on January 4, 469, would transform Henoch's teachings of love, peace, harmony, and the freedom and equality for all people into reality. The real reason for this undertaking was the Celtic philosophy, which in many ways parallels the teachings of Henoch, whose wise, effective and widespread approach should be implemented to make the Celts give up their degenerated behavior of barbaric killings and fighting battles. Merlin received a copy of Henoch's teachings, being the first part of the Goblet of Truth written on earth, memorized it and then locked and sealed it in a cauldron. This cauldron was no vessel made of gold but of bronze and decorated with a ruby the size of a cherry, and 3 small semi-precious stones rose quartz were placed in the shape of a triangle, and in its center the ruby was attached. The 33-centimeter wide cauldron was meant to collect water from a spring at the Grail. The Grail itself was a sacred place of a spring, usually located on a mountain that the Celts considered a nature sanctuary, and where also a druid's grove was erected that was surrounded by trees and other plants, where the druids meditated in deep consciousness-related interconnection with water, the earth, and plants as well as with inexhaustibleness of life. These holy places, which have been called the Grail, were intended as places of meditation for the druids. They were numerous and indeed existed wherever druids lived and fulfilled their obligations. But at the place with the water source, where also Merlin meditated, a vessel was linked to the well, known as the Cauldron of Abundance, which captured the water located at the divine Ceridwen spring. Merlin, the druid from Camelot, removed the cauldron of abundance from its place and replaced it with another vessel, because he put a copy of Enoch's teaching into the cauldron, which he and all druids then called the cauldron of life. Merlin presented this cauldron to his protege and pupil Arthur when he was 16 years old in year 485, after Merlin had thoroughly instructed Arthur and his knighthood in Enoch's teaching, and after Arthur had fought his first battle against Germanic invaders led by the chief Eel. But Arthur and his bloody knights thirsted for blood and vengeance, and they strictly rejected the teachings because they did not want to give up killing and conquest. Arthur thus became very upset and angry at Merlin and cast the gift of the cauldron of life into the sea with his own hands, although he later reconciled with Merlin again. This is the information I can relate to you. Billy, thanks, that's more than I expected. Some of this I still know from your father, Svath. Excerpt from the 471st Contact Report of September 16, 2008. Billy, it's a misunderstanding. I'm sorry. But then, there's something else. With regard to the 469th Contact Report on August 11, 2008, some questions were asked, especially about Kiradwina, the sister of your grandfather Ezekiel. Why was she chosen for the task of purveying Enoch's teachings to Merlin? Was she an Ishrish, and why did she provide the ray sword known as Excalibur, or Khalid Volch, to Merlin, which he then gave to his pupil King Arthur, who used it to carry out bloody battles? And what role did Merlin play in the murder of King Gorloy of Tintangel? Kiradwina was not an Ishrich, but an instructor or teacher in certain matters, and also a teacher of Enoch's teaching. This teaching activity was decisive that she was selected for the task of educating Merlin about Enoch's teaching. Merlin was unaware that Kiradwina was not a woman from this earth but rather a female Plejaren. She fell in love with Merlin and fulfilled several of his wishes because he realized on several occasions that she had skills far beyond anything he could explain as a druid. Such a wish was also behind the making of Excalibur. Kiradwina was strongly taken with Merlin because he did much good for the people and was very wise. Kiradwina also told him many things about the future that she had already explored through Voroscha Ungen. Merlin used them, and he attributed them to himself and called them prophecies. Unfortunately, Merlin was often fickle/vacillating, which is why he did things that were directed against the good, making Kiradwina very saddened and even angry. Consequently, she ultimately ended her secret relationship with Merlin, of which really no one knew anything. When Kiradwina could get a hold of the ray sword again after King Arthur's death, she destroyed it and then returned to Era. Billy, and King Gorloy's death, what was Merlin's role there? The assassination was not his idea. The kidnappers killed the king of their own accord because he threatened them with the death penalty and made a stand against them.